able to speak about that today. I'd invite her to come up. Denise, would you come up? Would everybody give her a gift? I'm going to let you sit by yourself, and I'll come and join you after for the question and give you a God bless you.
Good morning. I want you to know right from the get-go that man you saw on the screen is the love of my life.
Amen.
And he still is today, after 28 years of marriage. Well, I don't know what you guys are all doing in here this morning. We've had 3 days of rain, and it's beautiful. I think we should just all go outside and say, this pretty much said it all anyways. No, I'm happy to be here, believe it or not, today. And you know when you agree to do something and it's like, it looks like it's so far away, it's like 6 or 8 months down the road, and you think, oh yeah, I can do that. And then the week before, you're like, what was I thinking? And that's pretty much where I've been this week. But I know that God is stretching me and moving me out of my little comfort zone again. So that's okay, because I know that if He's in control, then I'm in good hands. Amen? And so I'm just going to give you a little brief history of who I am so you can see where I've come from. And when I look back at the lady that before all my life fell apart and everything, when I look back at that person, even the person that lived in Long Sault, if some of you are here from Long Sault when we pastored there, or some of you from Castleman, that lady is unrecognizable to me today. It's not the same person. So just so you know that. But I grew up, and I'm very proud to say that I grew up in a little town in Newfoundland. Glad I'm not there this morning though, because they've been having temperatures of about +2, and the ice is all still in the bay. I'm supposed to be going down there next month, and I told them they needed to get out there with hair dryers, and they needed to get rid of that ice. I've seen enough icebergs in my life, I don't need to really see any more. So they need to get rid of that ice, because I don't want to get a frostburn on top of my sunburn. So anyway, but I did grow up there, and I had very godly parents who taught me from a very early age about God and about Jesus and about church and the dynamics of knowing Him. And I thank God today because I have that foundation. And I have been left with a godly heritage, and I'm very happy to say that they've left me with a good biblical foundation. So somewhere along the way though, the lines got blurred for me. And instead of it being about God, it became about me. And I started to develop attitudes that probably did not represent God. And I'm not proud to say that this morning, but that's the truth of it. And so there were attitudes in my life and judgmental spirits, and I did not have a forgiving spirit. And so that grew inside of me. And I've come to realize today, and I'm going to be kind of flipping back and forth a little bit, bear with me. I'm going to try to follow my notes. If I were to look around this room this morning, I could probably tell you that there's 3 types of people in the room. There are people who live in a bubble. There are people who have a very slow leak in their bubble. And there are people who your bubble has burst. And if you look around your table, you're sitting beside people like that. And I'm going to tell you this morning a little bit about my bubble. And the bubble that I've lived in for quite a while. And inside of my bubble, I had a family that loved me very much. I'm from a family of 9 children. And so we were very close-knit. We still are today. If one needs something, the other one is there. And I had mom and dad that loved me and raised me well and looked after me and done everything they could. I was at the younger set of that 9, so I was very spoiled as well. And I was the youngest girl. And there was a boy after me, but it didn't really matter because I was the youngest girl, so he didn't really break my nose. And he knows that. And so So this is where I'm coming from, and this is what I want you to get that this morning, that because not only did I feel that I was spoiled in my family, I always said to my mom, up until today, I still tell her, Mom, I know you know that I'm your favorite. And I said, I know you don't want the other kids to know that, but you know, we all know. And they know, they just don't want to admit it. But I felt that with God as well. I felt that I was a very spoiled child with God. And so that's not so great when you think that, because really there's no grandchildren with God and there's no spoiled children with God. He loves us all the same. I could get them on the same level and stand on the same floor as you today. There's no difference. And so I did not rebel. I didn't go through years of rebellion. I aimed to please. That was my goal. I wanted to please my family. I wanted to please my parents. I didn't want to bring them any shame. I wanted to live for them. I wanted to please God. And that's how I lived my life. And I developed this mentality that if I did all those things and I did everything right, that nothing would hurt me. Nothing or no one would burst my bubble. And I would live a life that God would take care of all the other stuff, and I would not have to deal with the harsh realities of life. Well, when you live with that mentality, you don't have much compassion then for the people who have to go through those things. The compassion is not there. So I'm going to give you a real look at me today, who I am, who I was. And then I'm hoping you're going to see at the end who I've become. Because I didn't have compassion for the person who got hurt or did something wrong, or maybe it was they were betrayed or they were the betrayer. I didn't have that compassion. I didn't understand those things because I thought if you lived the way you should live, those things should happen to you. And so therefore there must have been something wrong with that person if they went through that. I left my home and my secure place in Newfoundland, and I moved up to a town or a city, now it's huge, called Brampton, Ontario. I moved in with my brother and his wife and his family, and I lived there for a while. And as I was attending a church in Brampton called Peel Pentecostal Church. It's a big church. And all of a sudden I heard about this young man that was moving up from where I lived in my hometown, and not far from it. And he was moving up to this area, and he was bad. And he was a drug pusher. And he was coming up for the one reason he was moving in with his uncle that attended my church. And what happened is he came up to Brampton to push drugs. And I'm not going to share his testimony. That's his story. But he came to know God. And so therefore he obviously quit pushing drugs, because that's not really good when you do that when you're a Christian. So he started attending my church, and so me, being the good girl that I was, I thought I'd set him up with a good Christian woman to help him, because he needed help. He was bad. And so he needed a good girl to help him. And so I set him up with this young Christian girl that I knew and started getting the ball rolling, and that did not work because God had a different plan. And so I was hanging out with him and trying to encourage him, and I was getting phone calls from my dad in Newfoundland saying, you better not even think about dating this guy. I will come up there and I will bring you home. And my dad, if anybody's ever known him, was 6 foot something. He was a big man, and he could actually, even though I was 18 at the time, he could have brought me home if he wanted to. But anyway, good girl meets bad boy kind of thing. You know how the story goes, opposites attract. We did get married. My dad is dead today. He's been dead for 20-some years, but when he did die, he loved my husband. He loved Roger. And so does my mom to this day. We had 3 awesome children. My girls are here this morning. They're over here. They just love it that I just said that. And I have a son who, for obvious reasons, couldn't be here today, even though he did try to convince my oldest daughter to give him a ticket. And I said, I'm sorry, but you can't come. And we did end up in full-time ministry. And so I'm skipping along quickly because I want to get to the reason why I'm here today. What happened was, I lost myself in who my husband was. My husband, if anybody does know him, is full of passion. He's a very passionate man. And when he does something, he does it with everything that's in him. He does it with 125%. So his ministry, his personal life, everything. And so I got caught up with that. And I became the dreaded pastor's wife that I vowed I would never become. I lost my identity, I lost my voice, and I lost who I was. And I became, this is the pastor's wife. Anybody ever hear that or do that to your pastor's wife? Don't do that. That is just wrong. Introduce her by her name. She does have an identity. So this is who I became. I became that nameless person. And I just caught up with everything. I supported everything he did, and I don't think there was anything wrong with that. And there's nothing, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with Roger's personality. It's what I was doing. It was all about me and what I had done. I had lost who I was. So the things in my life that I was doing was important. I was supporting him. I was raising my family. I was doing ministry with him. Those things were important. I'm not taking away from all of those years and all of those things. I led some fantastic ladies groups and some retreats, and that was the heart of what I loved. I loved that, doing those retreats, and this is why I love being part of these breakfasts, because it's just birthing in me, and I feel it. It's just, that's where I'm most alive. And I was consumed with all that, but there was something missing. There was something that was dying inside of me. And the lines, like I said, had become blurred, and God was sitting on the back burner of my life. And I would get close to him, and then I would pull back from him. And I would get close to him again, and I would pull back from him. Because I knew that if I took that next step, he was going to call me to do something that I was afraid of. Because I couldn't do it on my own, and in my own strength, I had to do it in his, I had to trust him more. And so I made myself busy and justified that by saying, well, I'm doing ministry, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I believed the lie that if I did everything right, that God would cover me and look after me. And I do believe that God takes care of us. But we do live in a real world where real things happen. And but I thought that if I did it all right, that it would be a trade-off with God. And I was kind of bargaining with him. And I did not think that anything or anybody could mess with my bubble. In my late 30s, the air started leaking out of that bubble. And I tried to ignore it. I thought it might go away. So the busier Roger got, the more busy I became. Because I wasn't going to sit idle. I thought, well, you know what, he's doing his own thing. It seems like now I'm going to do my own thing, which was not right on my, that attitude on my part. And it's interesting because someone sent me a reminder not too long ago, and it was only about a couple weeks ago because I was beginning to get busy, and I got this email, and it was the acronym BUSY. Have you ever seen it? And it's being under Satan's yoke. And so that acronym, when you're too busy, and you're busy running around, but you're really not accomplishing too much because you're too busy. You're under Satan's yoke, and therefore you're not effective. And when you get busy like that, what are you doing? You're not taking time alone with God. And so that's what I had started to do again. I started to push aside what I was supposed to be getting ready, even for this breakfast. And I was so busy, and I was at the place where I was trying to think, if I get busy, then maybe that'll go away. It wasn't going away, it was getting closer. And so I do have, there's a story, and I don't know if you noticed on one of the pictures that came up there, but stuff happens. And this is a story that's very real to me, and it's a story of a landowner. And he had been going through his gardens, and he found this tree that was not bearing fruit. And so he said to the gentleman, the gardener that was looking after it, cut it down. It's not bearing fruit. So cut the tree down. I'm not going to look after it. I'm not going to spend any more time or money on that tree. And the gardener said to him, give me 1 more year, and I'm going to dig it up around the roots, and I'm going to throw a whole lot of dung. Everybody know what dung is? It ain't nice. It's not pretty. It don't smell good.
It's farmer's gold, honey.
Yes, it is. And any farmer here today would tell you that. And so I felt that I read that story and I felt it real to me because I wasn't bearing fruit. I was doing everything else. Okay, that tree, by the way, was offering shade. So it was doing some good things. Not like it wasn't, you know, accomplishing something, but it wasn't accomplishing what it was planted for. And so therefore it had to be dug up around the roots. And that's what I feel like happened to my life. You see, it wasn't about Roger. Do you know what I'm saying? He was just being used by God to dig up my life. Because I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. I wasn't bearing the fruit that I was supposed to be bearing. And so my roots had to be exposed and I needed some fresh dung put on. And that's pretty much. If you want to read about that story, I'm not going to read it all to you, but it's in Luke 13. And from that came the saying, stuff happens. And so you can put whatever word you want for stuff. Hey, Pastor? I use the word stuff because I'm very respectful of where I'm standing. But stuff does happen to all of us. And we all need a little bit of fertilizer once in a while. I believe that everybody in this room has been created for a purpose. That's my belief system. I believe that every lady in this room was created and birthed for a purpose and a reason. And no one here was born for no reason. And God wants to fulfill that reason in you. And He wants to use your life, and He wants to use your story, same as He wants to use mine. So I lived in my perfect little beautiful bubble with my perfect beautiful family and my perfect beautiful life. And meanwhile the air was continuing to seep out of that bubble. And I continued on. And have you ever noticed the thread on your skirt or on your dress and you know you go pull it off and you realize it's attached and it's like too late and you got your hem is starting to unravel? My life was unraveling like that. And it began to unravel and come apart. My husband, I noticed, was being very distracted, and like he said, I'm here. I don't need to go into those details because your story is different than my story. You see, what you have to forgive for is different than maybe what I had to forgive for. We all have to forgive something different, but we've all had to forgive, or we've all had to be forgiven. It goes both ways. I believe I had that gut feeling inside of me that not everything was right, like I said, and I believe that if I had acted on them, if I had spoke up and used my voice, but you see, I'd lost my voice over the years, and so therefore I didn't feel that boldness, that courage that I could say something. At the time, we were in Casselman, and when it started, we had planted a church in Casselman, so we had left our church and gone to up there to kind of save the day because it wasn't doing so well. So we thought we'd make the good choice and we would resign Long Sault and go and save Casselman. That's not what God called us to do ever. So you see, we made a good choice, but we didn't make a God choice. And if my husband were here today, he'd say that's where he got. He left the train track. He left the train station on the wrong set of tracks, and his life was headed for derailment because he made a good choice and not a God choice. We took things into our own hands. And we were there and things were going well, but there were events that were happening in our lives and things were unraveling. And I'll never forget the night before my 40th birthday party. I had just come home from celebrating my mother's 70th birthday party in Newfoundland. And, 80th birthday party in Newfoundland, was 10 years ago. And that night, Roger looked at me And he said, and by the way, tomorrow morning there's a birthday party for you at the church. And I want you to know you don't have to go if you don't want to, because I'm resigning and I'm leaving. And the rug came out from under my feet and my bubble popped. And so that's how it pretty much unfolded. And you know what? Because I was so proud and because I could not face that, I went to church the next morning. With all of that inside of me, I buried it and covered it up. I put my nice little mask and my makeup on, and I went to church. And when I was standing in the front part of that church, and I could hear the hustle and bustle of what was going on behind me, I knew they were getting ready for my party for after church. And I just stood there and let it all unfold. And no offense to anybody that's here if you gave me this candle that day, but it's in my notes. Two things I remember about that morning. Afterwards, we went down and we were, I was opening gifts and we were acting all pastor wife-like. And I opened up these candles and I dropped one. And when that candle hit the floor, it shattered. And my life shattered at the same time. And I fell apart. And I was standing there and I was trying to keep this together, thinking that I cannot lose it. And I was holding all of this inside of me. And this lady said to me, "Don't worry, I'll get you another candle." And in my mind I'm thinking, that's the ugliest candle I ever did see. Don't worry, it ain't about the candle. And the other thing I remember about that morning is I opened another gift and it said, God always has a plan B for your life. And I threw that book away. I wish I would have kept it. Because I would have wrote a note on the inside of that book cover. And I would send it back to that lady today. And I would say, God does not need a plan B. Because his plan A always works if we listen and if we follow what he wants us to do and if we're obedient to him. So I walked around for a few years after that Sunday morning service. We went back to our house, we talked to our children, we said, your father is leaving. I was caught up in a whirlwind. I had no idea what was going on. I thought, how could this be? How could this be? And we talked to the kids and you know, all the yucky stuff that goes with anybody breaking up and all this. And my children, or my husband, made plans to move out. And I want you to know that people ask me, how are you feeling? How are you feeling? And the only way that I could explain to them how I was feeling, I said, if you went and you took a hot pipe out of a furnace, everybody knows like a big furnace, an incinerator, and you took a pipe and you took it out of that fire and you just drove it through the middle and left it there. That's how I walked around for many years with that inside of me. That's the only way I can really explain it. Roger moved out. There was nothing I could do to fix or control. I was out of control. I walked around with my mask still on, just so you know. And I continued to work in Castleman, and he continued to do, you know, whatever, and he moved into Ottawa for a while, he moved back into Castleman. I remember I would leave home on a Friday morning, I would leave for work with my clothes in the car because I wanted him to spend time with his kids. So I would leave my house and I would go to Morrisburg for the weekend. He would spend the weekend at the house with the kids. And I remember saying to them, because Roger at that point was like looking at the wall. There was no difference. It was like same theater. He had shut down completely. And looking into his eyes, there was no room for me. For whatever was going on in his life, there was no room for me. And I remember saying to my kids, because they were starting to pull back from their father, and I said, you've got to do me a favor, and you've got to love your father. And you have to love him for me, because he won't let me in. and he won't let me love him right now. And that made the difference in their relationship with him. And I'm glad that I did that today. The days from there and going through all of that was a blur. I know that my family was there for me if I needed anything. I didn't even have to ask. They were there. They looked after me, my brothers, my sisters. I didn't want anybody near me though. I told them, don't come. I don't want you here. I don't want anybody to see me like this. I went into a church in Ottawa where I didn't know anybody. I just wanted to hide. I wanted to disappear. I needed to regroup. I needed to collect what had happened to me, and this is where I was. And Roger would still want to call me, and you know, there were things that we were going through, and he would want to call me and share, and I'm thinking, you need to get a friend. Like, really? I'm not good enough to be your wife, but I'm good enough to be your friend? It ain't happening. So he would call me though, and then I would look out on a snowy morning, he'd be out and he'd have the driveway shoveled, and I'm like, I don't get it, God. I don't get what's wrong with him. If he left, he left. But he would still want to do these things for me, but it was about what was going on in his life. And so one day I just decided I wasn't going to be a good girl anymore. I remember having these thoughts, and I'm going to be brutally honest with you this morning. I didn't want to be a good girl anymore. I'd done everything right. And I had tried to please my family, my parents. I had tried to please God. I'd done everything by the book. And I thought, you know what? Look where that's got me. And so I was pretty hell-bent on going out and doing something bad. Aren't you glad that God saves us from ourselves? Sometimes, and He did. He did. He protected me from myself and that frame of mind that I had. But I did go out and get separation papers because I was done being in limbo land. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go and get separation papers, and I need to get out of this, because it just seemed like to me it was time for me to take some steps. I believe that, and the fact that my husband showed up one day at my house on a Friday much earlier than normal because he should have been at work, and he kind of humming and on about this and that, and I wasn't getting where he was going. And finally he looked at me and he said, I got fired from my job today. And I said, you did what? He said, I got fired from my job today. And I said, what? And he said, they told me that I'm not very sociable. Really? Do anybody in this room know my husband? Seriously, that is not a good description of him. And I started to laugh. Because I thought it was hilarious that he wasn't social. He didn't think it was funny at all. Now he laughs, but not then. But you see, God had to take him to that place where I had decided I was getting separated. I was giving him separation papers. And then God had to bring him to a place too where he wasn't depending on himself anymore. He had no choice but go. So from there, he decided to go get help. And things started to turn around in his life. March break, I was in Kingston with the kids. I decided to take the kids for something to do, fun to do. And I went to the Princess Hotel, I think it's called, in Kingston, where they had a water slide and all that. Kids were a little bit younger. They probably still like that if I took them there. And Roger decided that he was going to meet me in Kingston on the Saturday, and he was going to take the kids. He was going to go to Peterborough because I think his parents were down there, and then I was going to head back to Morrisburg to home. So I didn't realize that Roger had been speaking with a counselor at this time, and so when he got there, he asked me if I'd go and wash the car with him, and I'm like, okay. So I decided I'd go up with him, and on the way back, I remember we were going up over overpass, and he looked at me and he started to tell me some of the things that he shared with the counselor. And he said, I still love you, and I never stopped loving you. It wasn't about you. And I'm like, what's going on? And so we decided that night, or he did, to stay at the hotel. We were asked him if we could keep the room for another night. He slept in the bed with my son, and I slept in the bed with my two daughters, and I was very uncomfortable, let me tell you. Sleeping in the bedroom with my husband again was a very uncomfortable thing. And the next morning, we did a lot of talking. He went one way, I went the other. And I was just, okay, God, whatever you're doing here. And that was March break. So Roger left me on my birthday, my 40th birthday, and he came back on our anniversary, which I don't know what year that would have been now. I think we're 28 years now, so it must have been 18 years, because it was about 10 years ago. And he came back. And the counselor said, wait until your anniversary, one less to talk. We'd spent some time together, went out for dinner and all this stuff, and we got back together. And probably most of you think, well, that's a good thing, right? Not if you haven't dealt with anything. And so, within a month, we were back pastoring a church. That's not good either. So we began to rebuild a broken church, trying to fix our broken lives. No time really to fix anything. And things started to just begin to unravel again. Okay? I'd like to tell you that at that point I had forgiven everything. I didn't even know what I had to forgive because we never talked about it. Sad, eh? But you see how we don't have our voice, or how we sweep things under the rug. And so I just want to say to you about forgiveness. One thing that forgiveness is not, it's not ignoring or denying that something happened. That's not forgiveness. If you think that you've forgiven somebody because you're denying that it happened, or you're ignoring the fact that it's happening, that's not forgiveness. It's not sticking your head in the sand hoping that it'll go away or take care of itself. But that's exactly what I did. I never faced the situation. And I'm not even sure at that point I wanted to know the truth. And that's being honest. So we grew a church, and we had 2 great services. That God was doing some great things in spite of us. And this went on for a couple of years. Until one day, my bubble popped again. And my husband sat on the back deck of our house, in a house that we live in Cornwall. And he began to talk to me and tell me everything. And he went back over a few years. And he started sharing some things that had gone on and was going on in his life. And I'd already known again that old feeling of unease had already started to churn inside of me. And I knew. And when my bubble exploded this time, it was not pretty. I resigned. He resigned. We resigned our church. And we started to talk about what's the deep problem here, what's going on, what's the root of what's happening. And we went under a 5-year restoration program, and we just started to walk a path where we had to talk. We had to talk to people. We had to talk about things in our lives. And again, I had that pipe carrying around with me for a long time again. And I remember one day, Pastor Shirley calling me. I was in Cornwall, and she wanted to meet about these breakfasts. This is right at the very beginning, when I don't even think there was any at that point. And she wanted to meet, and so we went at her favorite place at the time, which was Cornwall Barbecue. And we had a beautiful lunch, and she's telling me about what she felt, and this is where she see God was leading her. And I remember thinking in my head, if you think that I'm ever going to get up and talk about what happened to me, you're on the wrong track. But that's not what she was asking me. She just wanted to know if I wanted to be part of it. And because I love women, I couldn't say no. Even where I was in my life, I couldn't say no. And so we began to walk together. And when we were out in the parking lot separating, and I was going one way and she was going the other, she looked at me and she said, Denise, if you and Roger ever need a safe place to go to church, you're welcome at our church. And do you know that at the time I thought, yeah, that's never going to happen. But we did go. And let me tell you that we were loved. And Pastor Shirley has spoken some things into our lives that not everybody had the heart or the boldness to speak into my husband's life and into my life. I just had to say that. I love these women that are part of this breakfast and that lead up this breakfast, and I gotta say this because they impacted my life. I love the dynamic that they have. I love the relationships and the friendships. They will love you, and they are brutally honest with you. But let me tell you, they're not very good babysitters. They will have you grow up. And I needed someone in my life like that would teach me it's not about me, it's not about my story, not about what's happening to me, it's about God. And I thank God for them. And I began to face attitudes this time in our downtime, in our restoration time. And I began to realize that I had lost myself. I was no longer who I should be. I had lost who I was. I was just trying to live the pastor's wife part. And I began to heal. And I began to realize that I needed these kinds of relationships in my life because I was very closed. You saw what I wanted you to see. I showed you what I wanted you to see. The good stuff. Nobody saw the yucky stuff. I want you to know, 5.5 years later, after this had happened to us, we were ready. They had released us to go back into ministry, and they had offered us a couple churches, and we didn't feel it. We said, no, we're not. And one thing that I've heard this lady say down here, Shirley, is that when she knows that God's telling her to do something, she makes sure that it's God telling her to do it. And then, when everything comes against her, she don't care if every demon in hell is released against her. She knows that she can stand because God's called her to do it. And that's what I wanted when I took a church, when we took a church. And I used to say that to Roger, we got to know that we got to know that we got to know it's from God. And the other two churches, we just did not feel it. And then Prescott opened up. Not really. We were supposed to go in there as kind of like pastors to just kind of look after it until they decided what they were going to do. But when we walked into that building, there was a lot of things that was going on in there. But I knew, and Roger knew, and we prayed. And I said, Roger, we got to know for sure that it's from God. And we did. We knew that we knew that we knew. And even when things kind of went down a little bit or whatever, we know that we're in the right place. And so therefore God's going to look after us. And last breakfast, when I had ladies come with me from Prescott area, I don't know how many we had, maybe 20 ladies. And when they walked through that door, and they were under the same roof as these ladies, you wouldn't have believed what was happening in my heart. Because I'm not just here today to talk to you about forgiveness. I'm here today to tell you that you need to be real, and you need to have people in your life that you love, and you have to have people in your life that love you, that's not afraid to talk to you, because this is important right here. And so I began to realize that God was calling me for something, and I knew that everything that I had gone through was not for nothing. I knew that from the beginning. And so even when I was walking it, I thought, God, I know you're going to do something with this, I just don't know what you could possibly do with it. And I thought everything was all under control here. But a year ago, I was asked to go to Brockville and hear this evangelist. And his name was Robert Martin. And I went up. I didn't even want to go, honestly. I just think my days are filled with enough. I don't need more stuff to do. So I went on the Sunday night, and this man had me from the moment he opened his mouth, he had my attention. And I said, I have to be back there the next night. So Monday night, I left work. I was pretty much pushing my clients out the door so I could meet Roger and go to Brockville. I work in Cornwall. And so he spoke things into my life that I knew was from God. And I know that God was saying to me, one of the things was that I needed to let it go. I needed to let it go, and I needed to let God completely heal me, and I needed to trust again. And that was probably an issue that I didn't even know I had buried. And I needed to begin to trust God again. Even God I had to trust again. Because remember what I said? I had trusted God with everything. And I thought he was going to look after all the other stuff. Right? I was exempt from the realities of life. But I wasn't. So he spoke a lot of things into my life that I thought, okay, that's enough, really? Like, you have to tell it all to me in one day. And it was like that with me and God, and that's how we have this relationship sometimes. And I didn't miss a night, and that man really ministered to me, and I found a lot of healing and releasing and letting go of the past. And I was driving home one night in my Jeep, and these words kept coming to me, and I didn't know where they were really in the Bible, but I thought they were in there, and it was, He has broken you, or He has, it's in Hosea 6, I was going to bring it up, but I forgot. He has broken you and He will heal you. And I thought, where is that? Where is that coming from? So I got my sister on the phone, because I have Bluetooth, I wasn't driving and talking on the phone. And I got my sister, I said, can you find this? Like it's in, and she couldn't find it. When I got home, I got digging through my Bible, and sure enough, it was in Hosea 6. And I started to realize that if God was the one that broke me and tore me, I think that's the word He uses, is tore me. He has torn me, and He will heal me. It's coming back. If He's the one who tore me, how could I get mad at anybody else? How could I be unforgiving to anybody else that He used, God used, to get my attention? Because you see, He used them. Roger was used by God to get my attention because He knew I wasn't where I was supposed to be. And so I'm driving home. Anyway, I